Welcome, everyone. The event is now live. John, please take it away.
Thanks, Annie. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of our ongoing editorial webinar series, Coffee Talk. Each hour-long information-packed episode organized by the hardworking folks at Redmond Magazine features the observations and insights of an independent expert on a wide range of tech industry topics. Many thanks to the underwriting sponsor of this event, Huntress, provider of a managed security platform for small and mid-sized businesses and the managed service providers that support them. Without their support, this series would not be possible. And thanks to you for joining us. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief in the Converge 360 Group of 1105 Media, and I'll be your moderator. Today's topic is Endpoint Security 101, Threats and Strategies SMB Partners Need to Know. And our lead presenter is technologist, creator of compelling content, and senior resultant, Howard M. Cohen. But before we get started, I need to do just a bit of housekeeping. This episode is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for an email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way in the next few days. We'll make some time during the talk for questions. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. Our sponsor has provided some extra resources you won't want to miss. They're available now in your console. And as a small thank you to the first 200 attendees who stick with us to the end, we will be sending you a $5 gift certificate to Starbucks. It's a cup of joe to go with the info. Now let's meet our first speaker. During his 4 decades in the IT industry, Howard M. Cohen has held senior executive positions in many of the top channel partner organizations, and he currently writes for and about IT and the IT channel. He's also a frequent speaker at industry events, everything from Microsoft Inspire to the Cloud Partner Summit, and he's a perennial presenter on webinars just like this one. Howard is a sought-after speaker, an insightful observer of the technology landscape, and one of our favorite presenters. Take it away, Howard.
Thank you, John, and hello, everybody. Welcome to Endpoint Security 101. As John said, I am Howard M. Cohen, a creator of compelling content, and if you haven't yet, I hope you'll take the time to go to Redmond Channel Partner, who is producing today's presentation, and read my column, The Evolving MSP. We're always talking about how MSPs are constantly growing, constantly evolving, and we'd love for you to continue the conversation with us. Okay, so those of you who have been with us before know that I like to start each presentation with a word of the day. And today is no different. Unfortunately, it seems that the video that I was going to treat you to has frozen. So please bear with me, close your eyes, and imagine that Indiana Jones, is standing out there in the middle of a crowd. The crowd parts, and there's a guy in a black outfit with a black turban, flashing his sword around in all kinds of directions, showing off his sword play. And with that, Indy pulls out his gun and shoots the guy. What did that guy in the black fail to do? He failed to adapt, right? He had this ancient weapon, beautiful weapon, a scimitar, if I'm correct, but Indy had a gun, a modern weapon that he was able to use to win the fight, hands down, real quick, done, let's move on. Now, adaptation is the name of the game, and unfortunately, that guy didn't change his strategies. We'll come back to him. Before we get started with the meat of the matter, I thought we'd define our terms just a little bit. Fortunately, today's terms are pretty straightforward. Endpoints. What do we mean when we talk about endpoints? Well, what we mean are these things. Okay, for example, your handheld device, your mobile, if you will. Your desktop computer is an endpoint on the network. Very few people, some people don't think about it, but servers and printers and other peripheral devices, they're endpoints too. And then, of course, there is the item in the upper left-hand corner, which serves double duty because it's the laptop that thinks it's a tablet and the tablet that thinks it's a laptop, and I'm using it for both. Both of those, they're clearly endpoints. Why is there a starship in the background? I like starships, but also I was going to try and sneak this one in on you as an endpoint, but last time I tried it, nobody believed me. So let's forget about that. And let's go on to talk about protecting endpoints, okay? Because that's basically what we're here to discuss. And let's start with your handheld device. Whether it's your device or not, whether it belongs to your company, you're probably going to have some of your own personal data on that device. Excuse me. If you're using it for business, you're also going to have some of your company's corporate business data on that device. And here's where we run into trouble, because you can't let those two mix. If you were to, say, text somebody a file from your corporate network, you just destroyed any and every investment your company ever made in security. You just leapfrogged their security, and that's it. So one of the first things we have to do on an endpoint is make sure that we're segmenting the personal data from the corporate business data so the two don't mix. For all endpoints, whether it's a handheld device, desktop, laptop, tablet, whatever, we need to be able to detect, well, we need to detect when something has certainly hit the device, but we'd prefer to detect it before. We'd prefer to detect it while it's on its way, while it's developing on the network and hasn't yet reached the device. We also need to have in place something that protects against malware, antivirus, anti-spam, and anti-malware. So that has been, for a long time, a big tool that we've used to protect our endpoints from a lot of different kinds of exploits. And at the end of the day, when we've identified, detected, identified, tried to block anything dangerous coming toward our endpoint, we need to have a way to respond. And we need to respond very quickly. We need to fix the problem so the user can get back to work. Okay. So we talked before about adapting. Here's a guy who has adapted. And fortunately, this video seems to work. This is a very important guy. I don't know if you realize how important this guy is. This is the first monkey to ever notice that he could pick up a bone and use it as a tool. He needs to crush up all the rest of these bones, so he's doing that with a bone. He has turned a bone into a tool. He could also use it as a weapon. So this is the first monkey to start to adapt. And of course, he got so excited, for those of you who remember 2001: A Space Odyssey, that he prompted the biggest time jump in movie history. Boom! Okay. And so more and more adaptation. One little adaptation led to a lot. Well, the fact is that cyber criminals have been adapting for a long time too. And as a matter of fact, that's the one thing you can be sure they're continuing to do. What was the biggest fear yesterday is no longer the biggest fear. It's been replaced. So, for example, we talked about malware. Most cyber criminals are not using malware much anymore. They've realized that people have anti-malware tools, and it's getting harder and harder to get past them. So why bother? Okay, so malware gone. We don't talk about malware anymore. Terrific. What they are using now is artificial intelligence. Evil artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence, of course, is accelerating and making their attacks worse and worse, harder to catch and harder to solve. Another adaptation is their adaptation to the well-known digital skills gap. What am I talking about? There are more than 4 million, and we're probably by now closing in on 5 million open jobs available, waiting for somebody to fill them all around the world in cybersecurity and other technical specialties. People are looking for more than 4 million qualified cybersecurity experts, and they can't find them. More than a quarter of those jobs are here in the United States. The result of that, one of the consequences of that, is that the people who are in our IT centers and who are trying to pick up the slack are so overworked that they're burning out and they're leaving. So we have even fewer people minding the store. Cyber criminals know this. And so they're finding ways to better exploit these poorly staffed networks. Okay, you're probably wondering why I'm showing you Ozempic. Ozempic. Ozempic is a brand name for semaglutide, which is a very, very effective medication used to treat type 2 diabetes. There are other versions of this, but Ozempic is the one that most people remember because of that horrible Ozempic commercial. Okay, there are other horrible commercials, but my point is, recently, some people have noticed that Ozempic kind of kills your appetite. People have lost a lot of weight using Ozempic. Now, the result of that, of course, is that type 2 diabetics are having a hard time finding Ozempic in their pharmacies because all these people are using it for weight loss. So Ozempic is a tool that has been repurposed for other purposes. Similarly, there are new exploits that cyber criminals are hitting with that we refer to in general as living off the land exploits, living off the land attacks. Of course, somebody had to say that that's the new LOL. And let me assure you, nobody is LOLing about this LOL. In its classic sense, you planted food in the ground, you cultivated that food, you harvested that food, cooked it, and you ate it. How wonderful. But that's not how the term is used anymore. If you think about that old TV show, MacGyver, MacGyver was a guy who was really adept at finding things that were laying around him and combining them to create something that could help him get out of whatever trouble he was currently in. Very clever guy. And he lived off the land. He lived with what was available to him at that moment. Another good example is this young woman who is wielding her rolling pin and her ball peen hammer. I don't know why or how she came upon both a rolling pin and a hammer in the same place at the same time, but I'm not going to question it. She has clearly grabbed them to defend herself against an attack. Flip that around and you'll remember plenty of movies where the detective walks in and identifies that the victim was clearly murdered using this lamp or this statue or this Fabergé egg or some other large heavy object that the villain found there in the room and used as a weapon of opportunity to commit a crime of opportunity. That's exactly what a living off the land exploit is. Cyber criminals are entering your network and finding tools that you have installed on your network because they're supposed to be there. And they're using those tools to their advantage to open doors for them that they shouldn't be going through. So living off the land attacks have become extremely popular. Similar to living off the land are RDP attacks. RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, basically enables you to sit at one computer and then across the network operate another computer that is physically located somewhere else. So you may be home, but you're using your work computer, your office computer in the office. Now, the important aspect of this is that means that you're kind of inside the firewall. Okay, outside, at home, you're outside the firewall. But when you're using that computer on your desk in the office, now you're inside the firewall. And now you have access to everything. So if somebody can get on RDP to your office desktop computer who's not you, they can have access to everything. And yes, cyber criminals are doing this like crazy with all these different RDP tools at their disposal. This has been going on for quite some time. Now, of course, RDP traffic, a network operator would not be surprised to see RDP traffic. They'd be even less surprised to see remote monitoring and management traffic, RMM traffic. Most networks today, from the smallest to the largest, have somebody monitoring their network and managing their network. Quite frankly, if all of you in the audience today are doing your jobs, those customers have somebody, you preferably, running remote monitoring and management software to run the customer's network. Again, RMM traffic is to be expected. So if a cyber criminal uses RMM to break into the network, that traffic won't be spotted, even if you're threat hunting. So it's very easy to get through. And yeah, if you can manage the network with RMM software, you can switch a lot of things on and off. You can make a lot of changes that can give you a lot of access that you should not have. So RMM has become a very, very popular tool for cyber criminals. Now, some threats that we've seen for a long time have evolved. One good example, the way in for ransomware. If you say ransomware, the first thing everybody thinks of is phishing. A phishing email where an email comes in, the user gets it, it looks like it comes from their bank or from their lawyer or from a vendor like Microsoft or Cisco or Citrix or what have you, or maybe it comes from their boss. It looks that way. It looks genuine. And in it says, click this link to do this for me, please. Or open this attachment and analyze this document for me, please. And if that user does either of those things, they have opened the gates to hell. Now the cyber criminal comes through and does all kinds of horrible and nefarious things, like encrypting your software. Encrypting your data and not giving you the key. You lose access to your own data. Well, phishing has evolved. Now they're not just depending upon email. They're stealing whole identities, kind of like the Groucho in the first panel there. They're spear phishing, picking a specific target to go after, and the email looks like it's directly to them. They're actually being able to break into networks over the phone and through texting and through popular messaging platforms, or by pretending to be somebody that they're not. There are all kinds of ways in which cyber criminals are now phishing in ways that they've never phished before. So this will continue to evolve, and we'll see all kinds of phishing exploits, but they're getting better and better. Again, it's another way in which they're changing strategies, they're adapting, and you got to keep up with them. Some are turning to botnets. They don't even bother having people attack you. They have a botnet that just goes around attacking network after network after network until it gets through, kind of like a robocaller, which is another form, quite frankly, of cyber attack. So automating the process obviously accelerates it. And by the way, if you yourself would like to become a cyber criminal someday, you can purchase bots, you can purchase ransomware software, and you can use it as a service. You don't have to know anything. You don't have to develop software or even purchase software. You can rent it. You can use ransomware as a service, bots as a service to attack whomever you like. And if that doesn't frighten you, I don't know what will. Others have adapted to changing environmental changes. I'm talking now about older, unpatched, or non-updated systems. Now, maybe not this old. This is 40 some odd years old. But even today, we are constantly experiencing Patch Tuesday or Patch Wednesday, depending on who you're getting patches from. A lot of people don't apply those patches. I'll get around to it. I don't want to break anything right now. Updates, security updates. Many of you may remember the days of Windows XP and Windows Server 2003. Both emerged in 2003, but didn't leave until 2016, 13 years later. And when they left, finally, Microsoft stopped putting out patches and updates for them. Cyber criminals knew that. And so anybody who stayed on XP after that, anybody who stayed on Windows Server 2003 after that, you know what they became? They became prime target number one. They painted a target, a bullseye, right on their own back. And so now cyber criminals were looking for those people. And they became the victim of choice. We still have that going on. People stay on systems that are no longer receiving patches, no longer receiving updates, or they fail to install them. Cyber criminals can find those, and so they attack them. And so this is a constantly changing environment that changes just as quickly as anything else in the environment changes, that you must adapt to, you must keep up with. And if your customers aren't doing that, they need to be turning to you to do that. And they need to be reminded of that. It needs to be emphasized to them. There are plenty of cautionary tales out there of people, especially from the Windows XP, Windows Server 2003 era. There are tons of stories back then because it was such a big change over so many years. But to this day, there are plenty of examples. The other adaptation is the concept of insider threats. The number changes constantly, but at one point somebody estimated that 80% of cyber threats come from inside the network. That means that everything you're spending on firewalls, intrusion prevention, at that point, that was a waste. People weren't trying to break into your network. They were already inside. They were accessing within. That number has changed radically. And lately, I've seen a wide variety. Actually, I've seen some people reverse that only 20% are coming from within. And it's too wide a range. Nobody has really gotten their arms around this problem. But the fact is that the problem has diversified. If we think about it, the most common insider threat is the careless user. For example, the CEO who leaves his office door open at night and leaves his computer on, and in the morning finds an email from himself firing himself. That's not good. It's just an example. We all see careless users making foolish mistakes. I mean, just phishing emails themselves. There's a perfect example. A user has to be careless. That's why social engineering is so effective, because users are careless. They're human. They're fallible. Payment card breaches. People are issued P cards or other kinds of payment cards, and they use them for the wrong reasons, or they swipe somebody else's payment card, or they obtain the data from that payment card and use it to affect transactions. Another example that we I don't think we think about as much is industrial espionage. People who are working for one company, but are really there to collect information for another company that is that employer's competitor. They are stealing secrets. They are stealing information that competitors can use. This is rampant. We hear about it when we're talking about nation states. China has a reputation, for example, for conducting a lot of industrial espionage. It's not a small problem, and it's a growing problem. In general, it is a form of data theft, but there are others. There are many forms of data theft. People steal tens of thousands of credit card information, records of information. There's all manner of data theft, and it's being conducted all the time. Also, there are people hiring on in IT organizations because, of course, every IT organization is looking for people desperately. If they're not careful, they'll hire somebody who is there for the express purpose of making things not work, of breaking things and limiting that company's ability to function. Underlying all of these is the ever popular credential theft. People are appropriating other people's credentials. Now, that is not a difficult thing to do. Still, one of the biggest exposures is the fact that more than 80% of users use the same password. You know what it is? Password. The word password. The ultimate laziness. Some of them do it backwards. Some of them use a 4 for the A and a 0 for the O in Word and think they're clever. Some use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Others use 8, 7, 6, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, whatever. I'm tripping over it, aren't I? These are common passwords, too easily spoofed. And so people are guessing them and getting in. This is why many organizations are requiring complex passwords and frequent password changes. It is a good idea to require passwords that are in excess of 8 to 12 characters, that contain a capital letter, a lowercase letter, a number, and a special symbol, and that change either 30 days or every 90 days, whichever it takes. So internal threats, big problem. Credential theft, actually, an even bigger problem. Bigger than it's ever been, because people are simply not careful. You may remember that Microsoft has more than once announced the death of the password. They're promising they're going to eliminate passwords and just use multi-factor authentication. Hasn't happened so far, but it may someday. Okay, so cyber criminals have adapted strategies, they've evolved strategies. We must adapt as well. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about this severe an adaptation of yourself, but I am talking about adapting the way in which we do things. So how do we do that? Well, let's look at the way your users expect you to provide endpoint security. Users expect that you're going to see a problem coming before it comes. So you're going to be proactively threat hunting, and you're going to identify everything while it's still out there on the network in the wild, and it hasn't hurt anybody yet. They expect that you're going to be able to determine what the best way is to remediate that problem, and you're going to instantly turn around and fix it. Detect, investigate, respond, boom. All in the same breath, all in one click. Show of hands, how many of you can accomplish that today? Put your hands down. Okay, so you basically have two choices as to how you're going to accomplish this. One is you can do it yourself. Now, when I'm saying you can do it yourself, I am speaking to end users as much as I am to managed service providers. The fact is they can do it themselves. You can do it for them. It's the same model, right? You're going to use available technology to monitor incoming network traffic. And ask yourself, how sophisticated is my monitoring capability? How sophisticated is theirs? Do they really have the ability to proactively go out and hunt threats? Will they recognize them when they see them? Do they have tools that help them analyze all this data coming in? And when it comes to investigation, you're going to analyze what you're getting from the logs and what have you with whatever tools you currently have. And again, ask yourself, do you have the best possible tools to do that with? Do they? And how are you going to respond? More often than not, let's be honest, it's trial and error. We have this problem. Let's see if this fixes it. That doesn't fix it. Let's try if this fixes it. That doesn't fix it. And on and on and on. And while you're doing that, your users are burning to a stub. Very bad. Okay, so depending on who you are, larger, Fortune 500 organizations, they may have all the great resources they need. Smaller organizations, not so much. So the other solution that's available to us now is endpoint detection and response. Detection and response is focused specifically on endpoints. And again, hey, guess what? It's the same model, the same exact model. However, an endpoint detection and response provider has powerful technology with extensive threat intelligence capability. What do I mean by threat intelligence? These services subscribe to databases that collect all of the threat information that's being collected all over the world by all kinds of providers. A huge volume of attack data, signatures, and other patterns that need to be recognized that can tell you when a threat is coming. Subscribing to those servers is subscribing to those services is exquisitely expensive. Say that 3 times fast. And so it's out of the reach of most providers. If you're going into the endpoint detection and response business, it's kind of a barrier to entry. If you can't do that, you're not going to necessarily be able to do the job. Okay, so they have that. They have powerful technology. They have all of this data about what everybody else is seeing out there in the wild. And they have expert people, superb people, highly paid people, but they are the best in the business at seeing what's happening out there, putting a stop to it. Similarly with investigation, they're getting raw data feeds and they are analyzing their logs with the most exquisite software that can help them correlate events as they're happening in real time, that can enrich the data so that they can provide better comparisons, better interpolations. They're doing root cause analysis to not only fix the problem, but go back and find what caused it and prevent it from ever happening again. And they're even providing custom behavioral analytics. What does that mean? That means they're looking to see if specific users or specific organizations are doing things that they don't ordinarily do. Why is somebody from marketing suddenly looking at finance data? There's something wrong there. That's just one example, but there are tons of them. And so they follow behavioral patterns of people, behavioral patterns of systems to determine if something's not functioning the way it ought to function ordinarily. And then finally, response. These, again, are the most sophisticated experts in the world, and even they are arming themselves with the best possible automation. They're using automated tools to increase the speed at which they respond and remediate whatever it is they have found. They can get closer than anybody to detection, investigate, response instantly. And that's why EDR is becoming so popular. Here's the bottom line. Few companies can afford everything I've been talking about. The systems, the technology, the tools, the platforms, the databases, the intelligence about what's going on out there in the wild, the people, the extraordinary experts that are staffing these organizations. If you think about just those expenses alone, you've probably blown most companies' budgets by miles. And so that's not a solution for them. However, an EDR service allows them to obtain the value of those things just as if they had them themselves. Now, you may recognize that concept, the idea of sharing resources with other customers to bring down the cost. That's the reason we love cloud. Cloud computing shares cloud resources, servers and storage and everything else amongst a wide variety of users that are not necessarily related to each other. Same thing here. EDR focuses that same cost-saving concept on endpoint protection. That said, the decision left to you is to identify the best possible EDR service. I'm not going to answer who that is. However, my friend John may introduce you to somebody in the near future who can. Before that, John, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we've got a few questions from the attendees, Howard. Let's just jump right in. Here's a question from Arnie who's wondering, Howard, you're basically saying we need a service. Isn't that just too expensive for SMB customers?
Absolutely not. I mean, if you stop to think about it, I'll use an example from the other side, from the criminal side. In earlier times, ransomware criminals would demand enormous ransoms, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions. You know what they noticed? Nobody was paying. Not for nothing, but nobody could afford it. Today, if you look at ransomware notices as they come in, they're looking for $100, $200, $300. They're looking for reasonable amounts because they know they'll get paid. Well, similarly, if I'm a business person and I want to go into business protecting people's endpoints, I'm going to look at who needs that. Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies? Probably not. Probably not so much. But SMB companies, small and medium businesses, they're going to need this service big time. So if I charge too much, I'll never get any business. But if I keep the cost down and I can attract enough customers, I can make plenty of money without any of them having to break the bank to do it. So no, the service is not too expensive. And coming from the perspective of an MSP who doesn't want to become an MSSP, why not partner with somebody like that? If you can't do it yourself, do it with somebody who can do it as well as you would do it if you could do it yourself. So no, I don't think it's too expensive.
Okay, here's one from Jeffrey. With the rise of Gen AI being used for malicious acts, will security defenders utilize AI to assist with automation on incidents and alerts?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But let me ask you a question. Let's say that you're just a regular guy or a regular gal, and you're a mid-level administrative person, and you write emails to people regularly. And here comes Gen AI, and hey, good news, it can write all your emails for you. Does that excite you? Are you looking forward to just giving pieces of your job away to AI? No. From the perspective of users, AI is a tool that had better serve them. And the reality is, we are seeing the enormous growth of AI ops using artificial intelligence technologies to accelerate and improve the way in which we manage our networks, the way in which we manage security. And yeah, that includes endpoint security. So yeah, they're going to use AI. Hey, listen, if I was starting up an EDR, I'd be putting AI to work. You know, I mean, it's kind of foolish not to. Everybody else is going to. you got to remain competitive. So yeah, you know, maybe it levels the playing field a little bit, but right now, I don't see that as a problem.
Thank you, Howard. Hey, folks, if we didn't get to your question, we are going to forward it to Howard so we can answer you via email offline here. Because right now, I'm going to introduce our second speaker, cybersecurity expert Chandler Fulton. After working at an MSP in Southern California on the service desk and project side, Chandler served as an information security and business continuity engineer in the financial sector before returning to the MSP channel as a sales engineer at Huntress. You're in for another great session. Take it away, Chandler.
Oh, thanks so much. And really great to be here, Howard. Thanks for teeing me up with all that content there. Really useful stuff. I took a lot of notes myself over here. But I'm here to talk to you specifically about Huntress, which is one of those managed EDR products and platforms that Howard was mentioning over there. So as I said, I'm a sales engineer at Huntress. I'd be remiss to not mention on a series called Coffee Talk that prior to being in tech, I was also a barista, and I can make one of the best cups of coffee in the tech world. Well, I'll probably have to put that to the test now that I've said that on a recorded line, but we'll go ahead and go forward on talking a little bit about endpoint security. And as you've mentioned, and as Howard mentioned previously, endpoint security is broken in a lot of ways. There's a lot of tools that are overcomplicated and overwhelming from a perspective of providing alerts and data that is useful, but for this purpose of actually providing security outcomes may not be the best there because of those being overwhelming. If you've ever had a tool that gives you alert fatigue, and whenever an alert comes through on that, you're just groaning because it's just another thing that you have to get through and check and make sure if it's good. And overcomplicated being you may not have the talent to actually investigate that properly. One of the things that Howard mentioned is that there is a major gap in terms of skills in the cybersecurity space, and a lot of MSPs are feeling that gap. Do you have the actual cybersecurity expertise on your team to investigate an alert if you do have something there? And so then you start looking into tooling, and you realize that some of these are even a little bit overpriced, and that's where that cost starts coming into that, because these tools are meant for the enterprise space, and you as an MSP are servicing more of the small to medium sized businesses. And so now all of a sudden you have to make some difficult decisions with your security budget, or your clients need to make some difficult decisions on the security budget with how to spend those dollars. And so one of the solutions here is to partner with an MDR provider. And what you often find with these MDR providers, or managed detection and response providers, is when you actually start getting the end result, the deliverable from them, a lot of these events and these alerts don't really add a ton of value, and it equates to just the same amount or even more work for you and your technicians. Those alerts get regurgitated without much context, without much in the way of what you're supposed to do as far as your next steps. And really these providers are just, built as far as capturing dollars, not threats. And so the support on them is often going to be a little bit lacking, because they delivered what they said, and the end result, it's not really something that you can actually get a good security outcome with. And so then you're left with the option of maybe we could do it yourself. And the option there is often a non-starter for a lot of the reasons that I mentioned before. There's that technical gap in the skills department. And also, even if you could afford a single cybersecurity person, what happens when that cybersecurity person goes on vacation? What happens in the middle of the night when stuff happens and attackers come in and start compromising endpoints at 1 a.m.? Well, who's protecting your endpoints at that point? Probably not that same person that was working during the day there. And so that's why I'm here to talk to you about Huntress. We take a different approach to EDR. We're not only providing the EDR tool itself, this is going to be a fully managed EDR, which means you have the 24/7 human-led Huntress SOC behind that EDR tool. And we're different in that sense because we necessarily include that SOC as part of the product. A lot of those other EDR toolings and SOC services will separate those out, and you'll have two different SKUs for those products and services. With Huntress, it's all going to be included with there, and so that security is given to you as part of it. And the cool thing about Huntress as well, because it's got that human-led SOC behind it and the actual cybersecurity talent to back it up, you get a result of less than 1% of the alerts that come through being false positives. So that alert fatigue that I was mentioning earlier is not going to be a thing with Huntress. When you get an alert from Huntress, you know that things have actually happened and that you have action to take. And then you actually get those security outcomes that you're looking for, which is that you actually get to have your clients protected by a SOC, and you get the time back, and you get to take advantage of the talent from the cybersecurity expertise on the Huntress side, and you get a company that's dedicated to making sure that the partner community is supported as best we can. I'm going to talk a little bit about the endpoint threat detection, since we're specifically talking about endpoints today. I do want to mention that beyond this, Huntress does offer what we call MDR for Microsoft 365 for your cloud tenants, as well as security awareness training. But specifically on the endpoint threat detection side, there's a lot of stuff that we're looking for, and that's specific to that EDR process, which is going to be outside of what next-gen antivirus or other front-end security tools are going to catch. Things like the malicious process behavior. So rather than looking for things like signatures or specific files, we're looking at what the processes are actually doing. And the SOC analysts on the Huntress side are looking at that behavior in order to make decisions about whether something is malicious or not. If you've since you're in the channel, you've probably heard Screen Connect in the news and in the talking space pretty recently. Screen Connect's it's a legitimate program by all counts, and it bypasses AV because AV recognizes that as a legitimate piece of software. Even if you're running an EDR tool, how do you determine if a Screen Connect instance is legitimate, if that's being used by attackers or not? And if you're not using a managed solution, how do you find out if the domain that it's going to is legitimate or malicious there? And that's where Huntress can step in and provide that expertise and help determine things like that. Not just whether a program or a process is allowed or not, but whether it's being used maliciously. And beyond that, we're also looking for things even earlier in the attack chain, like persistent footholds and the ways that attackers establish a presence on your endpoint and start to enumerate the network and start to find where they can actually get in and attack a little bit and do the most damage that they can. And then beyond that, I'll also call out the credential reports, which are down there on the bottom left there. Howard mentioned that password reuse and weak passwords are one of the biggest problems affecting security for end users. And one of the ways that Huntress supports solving that problem for you as MSPs is we can report on whether end users are using password files on their computers, because that's one of the ways that the end users solve that complex password problem, which is they create an Excel document of all their passwords, and they're using strong passwords, but now they've gotten them all written down in a plain text way. So those reports can actually support you as an MSP being the trusted security advisor for them, and also making sure that they move to a secure password vault or another secure method of storing their passwords. Going into a little bit of the workflow of how we do things here at Huntress, this is a little bit of what we see as the workflow. of security events, starting with all the way on the far left there with your antivirus. And Huntress does not have an antivirus that we install that's the Huntress branded one, but what we do instead is we integrate directly with Defender on an endpoint. And so that's going to be the free version of Microsoft Defender on your Windows and servers. And if you have another third-party antivirus that you like, fantastic. We're not going to interfere with that at all. You can absolutely still and should install Huntress on top of that. But if you do use Defender, we do integrate and pull telemetry from that, and our SOC can use that data in order to better investigate threats on your environment. But then we move to the second one, which is endpoint threat detection. And that's when our SOC starts looking for malicious behaviors, those persistent footholds that I mentioned there, anything that might present a threat. And then at that point, it starts into the human-led investigation part. And I want to be clear about the human-led investigation part, because every incident report that you get from Huntress about a security event or an incident is always preceded by a human-led investigation. That's how we get that really low false positive rate of less than 1% for your environments, because all of the events are always preceded by a Huntress human investigating and triaging that before it sends out, which is in the next part, which is in the communication section. The custom incident reports are tailored to the exact incident that happened, and it's going to call out exactly what the incident is, what the threat is, why it's malicious, where it is on the endpoint, and not only call out all of that specifically, but we go into the next part of remediation. This is one of the biggest differentiators on Huntress, in that we are very crystal clear on what the next step should be. And so you and your techs don't have to wonder, okay, here's this event, here's why it's malicious, what do I do next? We'll tell you what to do next. We'll tell you exactly what files to remove, what processes to kill, what auto runs entries to remove. And even better than that, we can actually assist with that with our click to approve assisted remediation. All we're doing is we're scripting our endpoint agent in order to remove those files for you without needing to involve your techs getting on the endpoint themselves. You absolutely can still do that if that's something that you'd like to do, because all the data is in that incident report that we're providing. But the assisted remediation is definitely the easiest way to do that. And so I'll close this out by just telling you, we do offer a free 14-day trial of the platform. Definitely going to be one of the easiest trials that you've ever run in terms of deployment, in terms of actually getting value out of that. This is a fully, the full platform in terms of the experience there. For 14 days, you can have the Huntress SOC protecting all of your endpoints 24/7, 365. And be able to uncover all of the events that are happening within your networks during that time. And at the end of that, you can opt into the Huntress Neighborhood Watch program and protect your internal endpoints at no cost. So with that, I think we are finished up with my section here. I think we have a Q&A for my own section next. So John, I'll kick that back to you.
Awesome. So I'm going to let everybody know you can still type your questions into the Q&A box. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Let's start with this one from Arnie, who's wondering, how can I get my clients to agree to invest in more cybersecurity?
Oh, this is a great question. The short answer is, and something that I always tell a lot of the partners that I work with is, it's not spreading FUD if it's actually true. And I say FUD is, the acronym for fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which is a thing that gets thrown around a lot in the cybersecurity space. The reality is there's a lot, the small to medium business market in general, regardless of which vertical you're in, is constantly under attack, and cyber criminals are going after those targets, sometimes even more so than the enterprise ones, just because in their experience, the attackers, they find that they're easier to get payments out of. And Howard mentioned, earlier that attackers are just asking for less and less money in order to actually get paid. That's because they can go after those small to medium businesses whose livelihoods depend on being up and being available, and so they're compromising them, asking for exactly however much they think they can get, and then getting paid from that, which is still going to hurt, but the attackers are going to ask for what they want to get paid. Cybersecurity in general is going to mitigate that risk significantly. Still going to be cheaper than paying a ransom.
Fascinating. Okay, here's one from Sven, who's wondering, what are some of the most common attacks I should be aware of?
Some of the most common attacks, especially these days, are going to be just run-of-the-mill phishing emails. It's probably the ones that I see the most these days are, persistent footholds established via an email attachment or a download. I think one of the more common ones that we've seen recently is going to be something like a malicious updater file. And I see this was actually a pretty big epidemic relatively recently with QuickBooks, where the attacker would establish a foothold on the endpoint using something that was designed to look like a fake QuickBooks updater file, and the user would get prompted to update QuickBooks, but it's not the legitimate QuickBooks service, and they would call a number that was actually the threat actors, or they would download a file that was actually from the threat actors, and then they would get compromised even further from that. And it even bypassed a lot of EDR tools because you would look at that and see QuickBooks and that and investigate, and it looks legitimate because of where it's installed, but the security analyst looking at it didn't investigate deep enough and wrote it off as an approved application. So as far as attacks that actually get through there, that's the thing that I would be most wary of, is things masquerading as otherwise legitimate programs.
Okay, here's one from Jeffrey, who's wondering, how should SMBs with a limited budget approach implementing an MDR or EDR solution?
Yeah, I mean, without tooting my own horn too much, Huntress is one of the big ways to solve for that. But really, there's a lot of other MDR providers within the MSP space that are designed around, providing this human-based support for the 99%. To use a Huntress talking point that I like to point to. There's the budget conscious way, and I don't want to say that this is cheap in any way, but it's because I don't want to imply that it's not providing value. But the way that Huntress provides that value while providing while not costing as much as enterprise level solutions is because our team, our SOC, the humans behind the actual EDR tooling are able to provide 95% of the value of an enterprise grade tool at that lower cost. And so there are vendors out there that will supply that kind of service for the EDR side. And I would say do research, get a demo, make sure that it's that whatever tooling that you end up using has the outcomes that you want in terms of the actual incidents that come through, the noise level that it generates, and make sure that it gives you that peace of mind that a security tool should be providing. Like if a security tool is making your life more stressful because all it's doing is generating noise, probably not worth your time there.
Gotcha. Okay, here's one from Zeke, who's wondering, what is your advice for small teams that need to gain the cyber skills to jump into the deep end on endpoint security?
Yeah, well, if you're already here on this on this webinar, that's a great start. But there's a lot of tools and academies and trainings out there that are really good for diving a little bit deeper on the endpoint security side. Personally, I'm a big fan, and I'm no way affiliated with them, but I use TCM Security Academy a lot for a lot of training, and my team does as well. And so I'm very big fan of that. Yeah, but beyond that, that's probably the best thing I would say there in terms of an affordable and effective training solution.
Well, thank you, Chandler. Looks like that's all the time we have for this episode of Coffee Talk. Many thanks to Howard M. Cohen for an insightful presentation and to Chandler Fulton for joining us on this informative episode. And a special thanks to Huntress for sponsoring us. We couldn't have done it without them. Keep an eye out for our next episode and for your Starbucks gift card. It should be coming your way in the next few days. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.